Okay, live stream is starting. I'll do my last few things I need to get all set up, and then I'll get these slides going.
Perfect. Thank you. For those of you who have joined, I'll let you in on I am joining today from New Jersey, the Jersey Shore, where I'm on vacation with my husband's family. And it has been raining nonstop the whole time I've been here. But it's finally, I think, letting up.
Just as
Awesome.
it's starting
David's
up in
joined us.
Austin.
Hi, David. You're mute. Classic.
Yeah. How are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah.
How's your summer been?
Good. Good. Busy. I mean, one would want it to be. I would want it to be, but it's been busy. So,
Yeah,
yeah. How about y'all?
the same. I was just saying, I'm zooming in from New Jersey. I'm on vacation with my husband's family on the Jersey Shore. But it's been, there was a hurricane in the Atlantic, right?
Oh,
So
that's
it's been
right.
raining the whole time I've been here.
Is landfall is it getting near
It's
landfall and near
no,
y'all?
it's off the coast. Yeah,
Okay.
so we're
Okay.
safe. We're safe. Just bad beach weather.
Yeah. I've heard I mean I'm only vaguely paying attention, but I remember they were talking about the Outer Banks being at risk, particular risk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It definitely seems like a powerful storm. Walked up to the beach earlier and the waves are intense.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes. But are you doing any travels?
I was in New York in June for, vacation-ish for 4 or 5 days, which was great. But aside from that, I kind of hunkered down. I was up in Taos for
Ooh,
almost a week. I love Taos.
yes.
But aside from that, I just kind of hunkered down and tried to be here. I was traveling a whole lot in the winter and spring, and I'm going to be traveling a good amount in the fall too. So,
Oh,
yeah.
good. Well, I'm glad you had maybe a restful summer.
Yeah, trying, knock
Yeah.
on wood. Yeah.
I've been wanting to ask you for so long, how is it that we get to hang out with you so much in Austin and yet you teach in Illinois?
I worked it out. It took a long time to figure it out. It took a while to figure out that I did not want to live in Champaign. But then when I figured that out, and I was down here for the Dobie Fellowship, and really I grew up in the Panhandle, but I'd not spent a lot of time in Austin. Um, and I fell in love with Austin. So it took me a while to figure it out. But I basically, I teach most of my teaching load is like in one semester. So semesters when I'm teaching, it's just usually the fall, although I'm not teaching this fall. And I always teach like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I just fly out on Monday night and come back on Thursday night, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. And a semester is, I mean, like I think of a semester as like half a year, half the academic year, but really it's like 3.5 months. So,
Hmm.
so I just commute. And then the other semester I have stuff to do, but it's more like, periodic commuting, here and there. I can do a lot of it remotely and whatnot. So,
Oh, nice. Well,
yeah.
we appreciate you commuting because we appreciate having you in Austin.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being down here and getting to work with y'all. It's been really fun. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
yeah.
good community.
It is. It is. Austin has a really lovely literary community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Texas, all of Texas does.
Are you from New Jersey originally or your husband
No,
is?
no, my husband's extended family is. I'm born
Okay.
and raised Texas. I'm from Beaumont, Texas originally.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm like the almost exact opposite.
opposite.
I
Yeah.
Borger, so far away, but
Would be
yeah.
many, many hours drive.
Yeah. No good reason to make them either. It's no reason to be in Borger.
We used to drive through the Panhandle on trips to Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you're joining us tonight. Thanks for being here. Thanks for
Of
being here
course.
early. We are going to get started right at 7 Central Time. So we just can chat for now. For those of you joining us early, let us know where you're joining from. Let us know your favorite sophomore novel from an author. Um, we'd love to hear who's out there in the audience. And David, I've also do you do your own audiobooks?
I haven't. No. No, neither t no, neither time.
Because you
Yeah.
have I read your books analog, but you have a great voice. And
Oh,
I was
thank
thinking
you.
you would be a great audiobook narrator.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it'd be fun
Cool.
to do, but like I'm not trying to make waves. They want a professional to read it. I let them do it. So, yeah.
Every time you've read it one page, I thought about that. Never
Oh,
got a chance to ask you, but
yeah. Thank you.
yeah.
Hmm.
Welcome, Anne. Welcome, Diana. That's true. We don't often know necessarily whether it's a sophomore book. Usually it says it's a debut, but it doesn't often say announce itself as a sophomore novel. Interesting. Something we might
Hmm.
chat a little bit about. David, do you have a book that comes to mind that you think of like an author you admire who you're like they really hit their stride?
You know, I love I also pronounce it Sulla, but I think everybody pronounces it Sula. I love Sula. I love all of Toni Morrison's first six novels. But Sula was so different from The Bluest Eye, and then, as it turns out, different from books that came subsequently. And it's sort of lean and taut in a way, even though it covers like a lifespan, sort of girlhood to death. And I just remember just being really wowed by it. I haven't reread it in years, but I remember really being wowed.
Yeah, I read it not too long ago, like within the last 5 years. It is an incredible novel, and it is
Yeah.
truly so different from Bluest Eye.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's a good answer.
Well,
And yes, for
thanks.
those of you in the chat asking, so sophomore novel is the book after your debut. So yeah, just the second book. Hi, Mac.
Hey, how's it
Hey.
going?
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We are just doing some pre-show chatter. We're gonna get started right at 7 Central Time, 8 where I'm at currently, 6 or 5 where you are,
Yeah,
right?
5. Yep.
Time zone math. It's a lot of fun. But we
But
were
I'll
just,
I'll take over with all my crazy announcements, so you'll
oh
have
yes,
time to
yes.
consider things. And
And I don't know if I'm sure both of you have met Evan, our executive director.
Hey.
howdy.
Hey.
Yes. And Mac, we were asking our audience members if they have a favorite sophomore novel from an author. And David was not definitively saying Sula was favorite, but that Sula
Mhm.
is a great sophomore novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if
Very
you
nice.
if you have one that
Are
comes,
you asking me?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but if one
Yeah.
comes to mind,
Yeah, Blackouts by Justin Torres is I mean, he's like one of my favorite authors, and his debut, We the Animals, is one of my favorite books, but following it with Blackouts is incredible.
that is
Hmm.
another great answer. Yes. Yeah, that's the other thing. Debuts very rarely win the big prizes, right? It's often when a writer's more mature um, in their craft. Interesting. Okay, we just hit 7 Central.
Yes.
So I'll let you take it over, Evan.
Thank you. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I got plenty of announcements for us ahead of us diving into the big program. But without further ado, let's dive in. So, first off, if you guys haven't seen or heard, we just announced our 2024 Book Awards honorees. The winners and finalists can be found on our website. And we are so excited to have had the opportunity to highlight these books that came out last year from Texas writers. So please take a look through. There's an embarrassment of riches that we have coming from the Texas literary scene every year, and 2024 is no less a year of it. So please check out our winners and finalists of the 2024 Book Awards. Um, We also just announced our fall 2025 classes and events catalog. You can see just about every event and class we have coming up through the rest of the year on our website now. And we have them on a handy little page for you to just mosey on through and see what you might be interested in. Sarah did such an amazing job, Laura as well, in putting together this beautiful, beautiful catalog that covers so much. And I highly recommend you guys take a look see through and see what might be appropriate for your writing journey this fall. Next weekend, we have our next Agent Symposium presentation with Jennifer Chen Tran. This will be Understanding Publishing Contracts. So throughout the year, we've been working through pieces of the steps along the path to publication. And this is one part of publication that every writer will, fingers crossed, eventually reach, which is what does signing that contract look like? What are the key things you should pay attention to? What do you need to know? What does your agent need to know and tell you? And Jennifer Chen Tran will be covering that all in a wonderful presentation next weekend. It was originally scheduled for this weekend, but we had to reschedule. So next Saturday, please join us. And also, it's not too late to join us for the rest of the agent symposium. You can catch all the recordings of the previous ones and sign up for the rest of them. We still have that package available to get you a consultation at the end of the year as well. So don't miss that chance. Are these symposiums priced like an individual class? They have a different price because they're only an hour and a half long. So they got a happy little price you'll find on our website. Depends on if you're a member or non-member. We also are bringing back the one-page salon from its summer hiatus. The sun is still hot, but comparatively less so from the start of summer. And we have a stacked cast of readers for our Austin first Tuesday of September one-page salon. You may recognize one of those names from this room right now. Sarah Renee Beach will be reading at this one-page salon, and I highly encourage you, if you're in the Austin area, nearby, feel like planning a trip, come on down. It's going to be a great reading. A great evening in general. Stacked readers. Yeah, Mac, we'd love to see you there. Um, Also, next, our first class of the new season is coming up right before you write, outlining, planning, and plotting with Jennifer Ziegler. Jennifer Ziegler is always a wonderful instructor, a longtime friend of the Writers League, and what better way to start a class season than looking at pre-writing and planning out your writing. Pantsers and plotters will be able to get a lot out of this class. I encourage you to take a look, maybe sign up for it. And if you are worried about class costs, I want to remind everyone that we also have scholarships available to our classes. So take a look on the class page and see if you would like to sign up. Next month, we are talking about writing ensemble casts. So books that have so many characters, maybe several points of view, just a big cast of characters that are all important to the plot. Join us and three amazing writers to talk about this expansive topic and see how including more characters in your story may enhance or provide more challenges to your writing. And of course, as I must mention every month, the Writers League of Texas is a nonprofit. We are a large nonprofit servicing the entirety of Texas and beyond. And we do all that we can to support Texas writers. That said, tonight's program is completely free to you guys. And we would really appreciate it if you could share a little bit of love back to us, either by becoming a member, which comes with a bevy of benefits, an embarrassment of benefits for a very low yearly price, or even making a simple $5 donation in lieu of a ticket price for this event. You can do so on our website. Donations to the Writers League of Texas are tax deductible, so consider that when you're thinking about planning out your giving for the rest of the year, because we sure would appreciate it in these trying times to be a nonprofit. Uh, but enough said. While we love the support, I think we're here to support authors, and the best way to support authors is to what? Buy their books. And in fact, buy their books and support a local independent bookstore by buying the books from our partner for this event, Book People. They put together a handy little website that you can easily go through and add the books of our speakers here, including Ursula, who is unable to make it tonight. Sarah will be able to say a little bit more about that. And I'm sure these books will be well loved on your bookshelf at home. So please click on that link. We'll be sharing it throughout the evening. But I believe that is enough out of me. We have a lot of fun conversation happening tonight, and I would love to pass it off to our wonderful program director, Sarah Renee Beach. So, Sarah, please take it away from here.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome also to those of you joining us on our YouTube live stream. My name is Sarah Renee Beach. As Evan mentioned, I'm the program director here at the Writers League of Texas. It's my great pleasure to plan our classes and events for writers at all stages, such as tonight's event on the topic of writing, publishing, and promoting sophomore books. We spend a lot of time chatting with debut authors about how to break into the industry, which I think are very important conversations. But I thought it might be interesting to talk to authors about that crucial next step of staying in the industry. And as Evan mentioned, sadly, Ursula is unable to join us tonight. She's under the weather. We wish her well, and I do hope you'll still check out her work. And we'll definitely have her on an upcoming program soon. So feel better, Ursula, if you're watching. We are joined here tonight by two really incredible authors with two very different publishing journeys. So there'll be much to learn and discuss. Yeah, and without further ado, I'll introduce our wonderful panelists. Our first panelist is Mac Crane. Mac is an author, editor, and teacher. They are the author of the Lambda Award-winning novel, I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, and the new novel, A Sharp Endless Need. They've received fellowships from Sewanee Writers Conference and American Short Fiction, and their work has been published widely, including in The Sun, LitHub, Catapult, Joyland, The Offing, and elsewhere. Thank you so much for joining us, Mac.
Thanks, Sarah.
And our next panelist is David Wright Faladé. David is the author of the novel Black Cloud Rising, a New York Times critic's pick and one of the New Yorker's best books of 2022. His first book, the narrative history Fire on the Beach, recovering the lost story of Richard Etheridge and the Pea Island Lifesavers, was one of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's best books of 2001. His second, Away Running, was named an outstanding international book by the U.S. Board on Books for Young People, and his new novel, The New Internationals, tells the story of an unlikely love triangle between a Holocaust survivor, a Sorbonne student from colonial West Africa, and a Black GI, set in the turmoil of post-World War II Paris. A former Coleman Fellow at the New York Public Library and Fulbright Fellow to Brazil, Wright Faladé teaches in the MFA program at the University of Illinois, and his work has been recognized by the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Texas Institute of Letters. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
And I do want to just PSA there, I'm on vacation with my husband's family and there's a lot of people and a lot happening in the other room. So I'm sorry if there's any noise leaks in. Um, Before we jump into our discussion, also, I want to let our audience know that we'll be collecting your questions and we'll dedicate some time to answering them towards the end of our program. So please do submit any and all questions you have for our panelists. To do so, if you navigate to your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A. And click that and you submit your question there. That way it doesn't get lost in the chat box. But we do encourage some chatter too. Okay, so For to start us off, I often find talking to writers that no two writing journeys look the same. So I thought we could start by each of you situating us in your careers, kind of leading up to your sophomore novels. So David, I'd love to start with you. Well, this is your sophomore novel. It is your fourth book. So could you kind of walk us through your journey up until the new internationals?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been a little haphazard. I don't think by design, but maybe. In part because I think for some folks, sort of a career as a writer is this sort of thing that they have aspired to or worked to for a long time. And I came to it a little bit differently. Um, from sports journalism and sort of figuring out what I wanted to do in the world or in life or whatever. Um, and then eventually sort of tried to imagine myself writing books. But with that said, I also don't, I think that the image of the writer, and probably true for a lot of writers, again, is this sort of knowing that they want to be writers, where with me, there have just been these stories that I felt like I wanted to tell. And so I'm glad I can call myself a writer, but it was really a few specific stories that drew me that I felt like merited telling, and from within my family initially, and then as you're out in the world, you stumble on other great stories. But if it weren't for like when those stories run out, I kind of think I'll be like, okay, I'm not a writer anymore. I don't know what to do. I don't know that it consumes or it's not that it doesn't consume. It doesn't. Shape sort of a lot of the choices I'm making, I guess is maybe a way to put it. That was a roundabout answer. I don't know that I answered your question, so.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so you felt like you wanted to tell those stories in nonfiction, and then you decided you wanted to tell fictional versions.
Actually, it was the opposite. I wanted to tell them
Okay.
as fiction, but then I stumbled on my first book was called Fire on the Beach, and it was this untold history of the Outer Banks. We were talking about the Outer Banks earlier, and again, I was in grad school. I think in my mind I was like, "Oh, this will make good fiction," but it was such there was so much documentation, and the story felt not that fiction can't be equally as important as nonfiction, but the nonfiction was so present, whereas that wasn't true, or it didn't appear that that was true when my co-author and I first stumbled on the story. We thought we might have to make stuff up as fiction because everything we were told was that there wasn't documentation. When it turns out that there was, it just made sense to tell it as nonfiction. And again, I'm a former journalist, never a very good one, but a journalist. So it felt very natural to write it as nonfiction, even as I imagined myself as a fiction writer. And the second book, it was a young adult novel, started as nonfiction too. And again, just the journey of it. Um, like nobody was interested in it as nonfiction. And my agent at the time was like, if this was a young adult novel, I think I know a couple of editors that would be very interested. So I think that's what I mean about myself as a writer. It's not that I have this clear vision of what it means or what it is I want to do. And when I have, I've sort of perambulated all over the place. Um, as much as the story, these interesting stories present themselves, and it seems to me like I'm looking for a venue or a way to tell the story so that it's out there in the world. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Mac, this is you are truly sophomore book, sophomore novel, publication, but you've also written and published tons of poetry, tons of beautiful essays, as well as lovely short fiction. So can you kind of walk us through your journey as a writer leading up to A Sharp Endless Need?
Yeah, sort of in David's same like line, like it was, not linear and a lot of things weren't totally planned. Yeah, I was always a basketball player first, so we also have the sports thing in common. I didn't think that you could be a writer. Like I loved writing, but I didn't think that you were allowed to like do that as a thing. I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But eventually I just kept writing poetry and I discovered that literary journals existed. Like I didn't know they existed, right? And I started reading like indie lit journals and stuff and submitting poetry there and then I was like, I really want to write short fiction. And I just started reading a lot of short fiction in journals and collections and sort of like teaching myself these moves that these authors were making, like trying to study their craft. And um, that's when I got a little bit more into like, okay, let me try to go to Tin House or like various workshops or take classes and, um, learn other craft things since I don't have an MFA. Like, okay, how can I sort of like piecemeal this education, read as much as I possibly can, and so I sort of had to give myself permission to take writing seriously because before I didn't think that I could. And so that permission sort of opened a lot up. Um, and I wrote a short story that ended up becoming my first novel. I keep my exoskeletons to myself. I wrote the story and I was like, oh, I want to spend more time in this world and with these characters. So I was like, I think I can see, expanding this. And I was able to. And that's a dystopian novel. It's like experimental and fragmented and speculative fiction. And uh, making my way to my sophomore novel, I really didn't want to be labeled a speculative writer or just any sort of writer. Like I've always wanted to resist um, labels or genres or things. So
Yeah.
I purposely didn't write a speculative book for my second book. So
Mhm.
we arrived at my sophomore novel, A Sharp Endless Need, which is like very realist literary fiction and like coming of age basketball novel.
Oh, yes. I definitely want to come back to that point you said about kind of subverting expectations, and not wanting to be pigeonholed. But first, let's kind of go back to the writing of your most recent books, and we'll stick with you, Mac. At what point did the idea emerge for A Sharp Endless Need? Was it before the publication of I Keep My Exoskeletons? Was it during? Was it after? At what point did you start writing? And like you kind of mentioned, what bearing did that first experience have on the writing of the second experience?
Yeah, so I had like a full 2 years from like getting the book deal for my debut book and like it coming out. Like it was truly like a full 2 year cycle. And so I was like, I have a lot of time. So I was like distracted. Like I wanted to distract myself because I was very nervous about this book coming out. So for me, that's always writing something new or finding some other thing to chase. So I did come up with the idea for Sharp Endless Need before my debut book came out and was working on it in that 2 year span, but sort of alongside that, I was also writing a memoir, sort of what David said, like I didn't know like what vehicle or like package like something needed to be in. So I wrote a whole memoir and that was like some of those themes ended up showing up in A Sharp Endless Need and editors didn't want the memoir. Like um but it was like about athlete identity and grief of losing basketball and what it means to create an identity around a thing and all that stuff. So I like, got rid of that and just focused on A Sharp Endless Need and putting some of those memoir elements, exploring like those themes in that package. But yeah, I was writing it before exoskeletons didn't even came out because I think I was like, I don't want to freak out and enter the sophomore slump that everybody talks about like after the debut comes out. I was afraid of it. So I was like, if I could just get ahead of it. Um, so I mean, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's what they say, right? Distract yourself, be working on the next thing. What about you, David? I know there was a note in your acknowledgement section about how long ago you started the New Internationals. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Mac, I mean, I tend to, for similar reasons, I think, and maybe only slightly differently, I tend to put more than one ball in the air at the same time. Part of that is just a process thing, so I don't get stuck, or you get to a place where you might get stuck or it gets difficult for whatever reason. And then there's this other thing. It might be short, might be longer, but having a few balls in the air has always been helpful to me. But also, again, similarly, I think just sort of trying to um, understand myself, but also sort of identify myself. That's a bad way to put it. Not in the world as a writer, but just sort of to understand myself as a writer meant sort of sticking with it for a long time. So yeah, the New Internationals, that was the story I thought, not immediately. I did do an MFA, not immediately when I went in the MFA program, but it was part of what I thought I was going to be working on. And I wrote a very, very, very well, relatively short story in the MFA program just to sort of try to see if there was something there for me to work with. And it was in a Shenandoah small literary journal, and I started working on it after that. Um, and a lot of my work is very research based, and it just kept failing. So I mean, I guess I failed, but I failed at this specific project. So it began as a short story in 2000 that I wrote as in the MFA program in the 90s. I published in the early aughts. And then I think the first final draft I circulated to agents in 2007. And it was big and sprawling and trying to do a lot of things that I thought I could pull off, and I just couldn't. And so I, worked on something else, the thing that became Away Running, and I would come back to it, and I thought I finished it again in 2014, and a different agent was like, I love this. And she said back to me exactly what it was I thought I'd written, which wasn't always the case. Like you query people and people would be more or less interested, or, you have a book out. And so agents are, you're not, I wasn't always sure. I'm still not always sure why. I mean, part of the reason an agent is drawn to your work is because they're interested in the work, but it helps if you have a track record. So, I had a couple of books, and then here's this thing that was much rewritten, still big and sprawling. And the agent told me exactly, described exactly what it was I thought I'd written, and it failed again. But again, because that was the story that I thought that brought me to writing, to fiction writing, it felt important to keep trying. And so that stick-to-itiveness, I just sort of went back to it and figured out the way to make it work.
Wow, I'm so glad you stuck with it.
Thanks.
Yeah,
That's wild.
you
Like,
truly.
and
20
like
years.
so much perseverance. Like, it's incredible.
It is. It is.
Uh,
Yeah.
I tell this story a lot, and I'm going to tell it very briefly because I suspect I've said it in this venue probably to half the folks who have heard me speak before. But and it was for not the New Internationals, but for Black Cloud Rising. I queried 150 agents before I landed the agent that I have, and I told myself I wouldn't query more than 50. Um, and I'm only saying that as a way to say, I mean, I got hints along the way that there was something there, but the potential agent would inevitably turn it down. The thing that I think is most important for writers at any stage is just stick-to-itiveness. You have to have sort of uh, faith, if not confidence, in the thing you're doing, um, a willingness to keep reworking it, and you just keep pushing. Keep trying. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and have another project going because you
And
don't
have
know
another
when
project
that'll
going.
go and then you can go back to the other. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And so with you having published before, did you have a sense with the new internationals, this is my audience, I know who they're going to be, or were you trying to meet that audience's expectations, or are you trying to find a new audience or subvert expectations? Did audience, come in at all as you were finishing the new internationals?
Audience did, and but also market. It's distinguishing those two, and not in this just sort of purely sort of. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with it, but not just sort of purely like you know uh, genre-y sort of way. Like Mac was saying earlier, the project to me sort of dictates the form, the shape, the vehicle. Um, so more than anything, it was the business part of it that played a role with the New International specifically. This is the first project I've had where I've had the same agent. I've had like 6 or 7 different agents over the years. a ton of agents. And a lot of that was just me failing, the project failing. Some of it was just sort of, they thought that I was more bankable than it turned out that I am. Um, but so that piece of it mattered. On the one hand, my current agent who sold Black Cloud Rising before the New Internationals is just great. Again, he was the 151st one I queried, but he was sort of my dream agent that I didn't think I had access to. He's, at a big company. And, they say you can query him, but you can't get their information, their email addresses and whatnot. Um, and so I like working with him, but also with Black Cloud Rising, and some of the work I was doing at that time sort of gave me access to an audience. Um, a literary audience that I wasn't always sure um, I could I might be able to reach. But with that said, like I want for me, I want my work to be read as broadly as possible. So audience is a little nebulous in that regard. But what isn't is my fear was that, um, I if I landed at a publishing house where like I'm ignored because there are bigger writers there, or for a while Black Cloud Rising was with a really small publishing house who I liked them a lot. We had some different other conflicts that sort of where I pulled out. More than anything, I want to be read, and so I just try not to define that too terribly closely. I if you'd have asked me about Black Cloud Rising, I'd have been like, that's literary fiction. Everything I read in reviews and whatnot, they called it historical fiction. Okay, if that's what you want to call it, in my head, I know what it is I'm trying to do, and I'm going to let you call it what you need to call it to sell it so that people buy it or whatever.
Oh yeah, wow, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I definitely want to come back to some of that, especially those conversations you had with your agent. Mac, what about you? Did you have, I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, was a huge hit and people adored it. So did you feel any pressure kind of to keep that audience with you for your second book? Like you said, you didn't want to be pigeonholed as a certain kind of writer. So what were you thinking about, if at all, audience-wise?
I, is it a huge hit? I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I've never thought that. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like most writers have this problem of like just the intersection of capitalism and creation. It's so hard for me to sit down and be like, what makes sense for my career? Like, my agent's like very adaptable and she will like sort of let me run with whatever ideas I want. But she occasionally encourages me to actually like not crash and burn my career by like just doing the most like the strangest choices. So she's like, what makes next step, da, da, da. And I'm like, yeah, a coming of age queer basketball story. And she was like, sure. Um, my audience was very for exoskeletons, I think, like queers, obviously people who like dystopian and speculative fiction. So it was going to be, I think, a widening of the audience, or at least like targeting different sort of readers. Basketball can really like turn a lot of people off, like just sports in general. Like if somebody hears that sort of word, it's just like, oh, I really like that, or like I really do not like that, and I have no interest in it type of thing. Like it almost yeah, it's hard to get people to give it a chance if they're not already fans. So that was sort of a thing of like, all right, like who's gonna read this? And then Caitlin Clark got to the WNBA, and now the WNBA is having like a huge renaissance, and so great timing for me. But so just sort of reaching those people, like there's a lot of people on TikTok who are like WNBA fans and they're readers, and I'm all right, how do we get you guys my book? So yeah, there's sort of a widening of it, but I guess my goal is just no matter what I write, I want people to be a fan of just like what I produce, regardless of sort of like the topic. Like I want to be that author who's like an auto buy for someone. Like those are like my lofty goals of like I don't really care what it's about. Like I know that you're gonna like tear me apart in all the best ways and like do XYZ. So like regardless of what it looks like, what genre it is, what it's doing, like you're an auto buy. That's like my dream. That's a
Mhm.
big dream. But
I think it's happening. And so both of you mentioned kind of the conversations you had with your agents. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of strategizing when you're going out to publications? Was it you knew you wanted to have a different experience, or there's something that was important to you from your first experience working with the publishing houses themselves and working with editors? If you could let us into like any strategizing or kind of just desires you had going into those conversations. And we'll stick with you, Mac.
oh. Yeah, I mean, I was with Catapult for my first book and I had a really great experience there. Obviously I did a panel with my editor, Alicia, at the Writers League of Texas conference. Like they remain a great friend of mine, even though I've gone to a different publishing house for my next book. We had a great editing relationship, like super collaborative. My marketing and publicity was great. I had a wonderful experience, and I felt, and David touched on this, like they're an indie publisher, like they're sort of a bigger indie publisher, but they're indie, and they were able to give me a little bit more attention, especially that I felt like I needed for a debut book, just feeling like you don't know what's going to happen, like you have no idea what the process is like. It felt helpful, like I wasn't getting lost amongst, I don't know, James Patterson, like whoever. Um, so yeah, I had a great experience. Like the reality of the situation and what people never want to talk about is like just the money. Like I wanted to go to a bigger publisher and try to get a bigger advance and make those things happen. And that's ultimately like what's guided my choice in leaving Catapult.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for giving us that insight. And how was your experience working with the bigger publishing house?
Yeah, so it's Dial Press. They're under Penguin Random House. It has been interesting. Like they have a lot more authors. So they are like the publicity and marketing team, like they are juggling a lot more. Um, so that's sort of been an adjustment. But my editor's like just as amazing. We have like I went there because of this editor as well. Like um, we have an incredible working relationship, and we're also friends, and um, it's like a really special connection there that we have. And for me, like that's not many things can sort of replace that, like finding an incredible editor that you feel so connected with and aligned with, even if you disagree on things, like being able to like duke it out or feel safe and comfortable to be able to do that sort of thing. Like um, n not a lot of things can compare to that for me as far as like working with somebody and choosing somebody.
Yeah, and that's great. You've had two great experiences with editing. That's great. David, what about you? What was it you were looking for in this kind of second go around with your novel?
I'm with the same house. I'm with Grove, and my experience with Black Cloud Rising with Grove was great, and so I um, was happy to work with them.
Hmm.
Again, the way that the contract, and I think most contracts work this way, is like the book that was published, the house has the right of first refusal um,
Mhm.
to the next book, which doesn't mean that you're going to be with them, but they get first look. And so I was happy about that because I had a great experience with Black Cloud Rising and the folks I was working with at Grove and all that. But honestly, again, because I've been doing this for so long and I've had such, a range of experiences from, my first book that came out and, the editor basically retired afterwards. Uh, and then my second book, the young adult novel, originally I had landed with Penguin, and the editor who acquired it got laid off in the production year, and so it was orphaned. And then nobody was interested in it. For me, I had a great experience with Grove. I was happy to stay with them again. And then it felt like, and my agent was telling me this, um, for whatever reason at the time that the manuscript was circulating, he was like, people don't seem to be buying literary fiction right now. How they determined that, I don't know. What and whether it's true or not struck me as less important than that was the impression. So we didn't even go out. Like Grove took a little bit of time, made an offer, and we just left it alone. And I was happy to work with Grove again. Um, it's interesting though, and I would just add this as a caveat. There's a part of me that's super pragmatic, and I also like I'm I'm basing it on impressions I have that could be completely wrong. But um, I feel like part of my apprehension about bigger houses, and Grove of the big houses is one of the smaller ones. Um, I just feel like what's hard, and you were alluding to this, Mac, what's hard is remaining seen within the house. You just don't want to get lost. And it's really easy to get lost because, Hillerman's or Patterson's books is going to come out, or this one or that one. And at the bigger houses, I think that's all the more true. They say that, the big books permit them to sort of publish the smaller, more literary books, but I don't even know if that's so true anymore. Um, so I was my the fact that my experience with Black Cloud Rising had been great influenced it. Um, I took a little bit less advance, again, because the marketplace was saying that literary novels aren't publishing. And I have to say, I feel a little less seen this time, even though I know everybody there likes me. I know they like working with me. I sort of take them at face value for my experiences with them. But sometimes I feel like it's a little less seen. So the market part of it, the business part of it remains um yeah, always for me, always something to consider. Not, don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, I'd love to get a good $1 billion, but it's not so much that I want all the money in the world, but I feel like there's a correlation between what they invest in buying the book and then how they then
Yeah.
invest in selling, promoting the book,
Yeah, let's talk about publicity and promotion. What kind of lessons learned did you bring into this kind of thinking about touring and promoting this book? And yeah, what bearing did the publishing house have on that?
Who would you like to go first?
Oh, yeah, we'll have Matt go first.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm doing bad job of
No,
spotlight.
no, no, no.
Man, you know, uh, I think I was a little bit more proactive with this book as far as communicating with my marketing and publicity team because I knew what those things were. Like with my first book, I was like, I'm not even sure what these things are. And who is doing what. I was always emailing the publicist when I should have been emailing the marketing team, and I always emailed the marketing team when I should have been the publicist. Like I had no idea what they were supposed to do. And then I was just like emailing them all and was like, this goes to one of you. Um, but so I felt a little bit, I had the lay of the land. And I didn't go on book tour for my first book. I had we had my first kid, and it was still like COVID was surging a lot. And um, I live in San Diego. I did a San Diego event and I did an LA event a few months later. And then I did one virtual event, and that was it. So for my second book, I wanted to do a tour, not a big one. Now I have two kids. But like just something like I want to do a few in-person events. Um, and my publisher was just sort of at first was just like, oh, we don't see sales from, in-person events. Like they're always just sort of like, or it doesn't affect sales that much, or it's not like the first time that I've been told that, and it felt a little bit like discouraging. But I was like, I'll pay for the whole thing. Like I'm not actually really asking you to do anything except for to like organize with these bookstores. But I'm not like, hey, pay for my hotels. And they were like, okay, but it was like sort of some pushback and sort of weird. Needless to say, I think you have to sort of advocate for yourself sometimes. I think the first time I didn't do that as much when there were maybe things that I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, but the real thing with in-person events, I mean, they do sell books. Like the week that I was on tour, I sold the most books. But also like you make bookseller relationships, and you just meet your readers, and that's really special for the reader and for you. And so much of selling books, if you're not being pushed as like the next big thing is word of mouth and booksellers. Indie booksellers are like the ones pushing our books. And if they meet us and they like us and we have a great event there, they might just pull our book a little bit more often next time someone's like, hey, do you have this great da da da? Like those things are priceless, I think. Sort of just having those ongoing relationships.
Hmm.
So that was like a good sort of difference for me this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you advocated for yourself in that way. Thank you for sharing that. David, what about you? What were you looking for in this specific promotion and tour go around, and what lessons learned were you incorporating?
I mean, it's going to echo a lot of what Max said, but it's sort of cumulative from the first book. And I also think in that the sort of span of sort of like from my first book to now, like this about 25 years, Fire on the Beach came out in 2001. Like now I get the impression that there's more this, like I heard a lot of things that you were saying you were hearing, Mac, and that, there's this feeling that they're not sure that book tours or those sorts of events necessarily help sales or maybe help sales in the way that they might have in some previous era. With Fire on the Beach, it was still more kind of a touring era.
Mhm.
Um, I just made myself even then like really available and in the way that you're describing, advocated for myself. What I've learned with these two more recent books, even as there was a little bit of reluctance, part of this is also one thing that you said that I think is hugely important. So much of what we do is relational. It's about relationships. And sometimes it's not even apparent in the ways in which that is good. On a purely basic level, like I just love these sorts of events. Like we're talking amongst writers, we're talking about ourselves and sharing our experiences. And all that I think is just interesting as well as useful. And so if the world we're in is broadly relational, it just seems to me that obviously I want to be out so that that leads to book sales. But if I'm out, then people start to identify, I think, then the name David Wright Faladé with, a certain voice, for lack of a better word. And so with the two recent books, I just let them know that I was available to do whatever, um, without pushing it too much because you're juggling the relationship with the house too. If they're not behind it, I don't want to be that sort of difficult writer who da da da. And so Black Cloud Rising, they sent me out and it started to gain a little momentum, various book festivals. And that carried over. Being with the same house in that regard was useful, and that carried over. So I was again at the Tucson Book Festival for the New Internationals. That led to the Virginia Festival of the Book. I was at the Mississippi Book Festival and the Texas Book Festival for Black Cloud Rising. That led to return visits, but then other relationships that grew from it. Um, so I look at it that way. I just try to make myself as available as possible as the house is willing to do without sort of, being the, pain in the ass writer. And then I show up. You show up and you have conversation and, yeah, engage with people.
Yeah, the world is relational, truly. And I do like this notion that it's cumulative. Your efforts build on each other and you build those relationships. Um, so David, going into like go back to 2001, what was your idea of success? And have those ideas shifted or changed now that you've had all these different experiences in publishing?
Yeah. I was relatively recently out of the MFA program, so I felt lucky that there was this interest in my work, and I'd stumbled on this really good story, and there was interest in it. But again, it was sort of bumbling forward. I didn't know what I was doing, and I went in different directions. But on some level, when Fire on the Beach landed with Scribner, in my mind, I'm like, great, I have arrived. And then like seven agents later, I'm like, what happened? So I think the sort of experience with Fire on the Beach sort of um, shaped my, not expectations, but sort of my um, understanding of what the world of publishing is like, certainly in regards to me, and and how to sort of navigate it in a way that allows me to get my work done and get the work that I aspire to have out in the world with without the sort of larger dreamy sort of expectations that I had in 2001 when I was like, all right, this is going to be a bestseller and sign me up for the National Book Award. Um, I would love for any of that great stuff to happen, but I feel like I'm very craft obsessed. You write the best book you can with this thing that you're trying to say, and then it's a little bit out of your hands. I mean, you proactively try to direct it. I've tried to proactively direct it as much as possible, but there have been so many just turns. It's a little bit out of your hands and you just keep moving.
Yeah, that's well said. Mac, what about you? Going into publication of your first book, what was your idea of success, and what is your idea of success now?
Man, it's a sticky question. Because I feel like I don't know what I thought success was gonna be with the first one. I was so grateful that this book had found like a good publisher. Um, which sounds silly to say, but it was like a hard sell. Like it's just fragmented, it's experimental, it has like pop quizzes in it and like crossword puzzles, like all of the stuff. And, we got a lot of rejections, and it was just like, all right, it's gonna take like a special place to sort of like see what this is and wanna like work with me. So I was really just like, oh man, I have a book deal. Like I'm gonna have a book. So for a while that there was nothing sort of beyond that besides like this is a milestone that I've been working towards for so long. Um, but I do find that it's been really easy for me, given that to like fall into some sort of traps of like conventional measurements of success, right? Like awards, making bestseller lists. Like I like to consider myself immune to those things, but that's false. There's always I have like comparisons or the next goal, oh, I want to get on this list or whatever. And they're not like I realize they're not like fulfilling goals. Like they won't leave me with this like really great feeling of satisfaction. Like it'll just be like, all right, what's the next thing? So when I'm at my best and when I'm not comparing myself, my measurement of success is something that I can't measure right now, but I want my books to have staying power. Like just that's it. Like I don't want them to disappear. I want them word of mouth, like to constantly be spreading my books. I want them to like linger um for a really long time and have that sort of like love for them. Like I even want them to be like I was thinking the other day about how like poems, obviously much shorter, but like things that we often turn to in times of need or trouble or distress or something, and we need something from them. Like I want my books to be things that people actually like return to or pick up in times of something, or if they need something. And that's not measurable, but it's what I would consider to be deeply, like truly successful for my work.
Yeah, that's really poignant. I feel like it echoes what David said too. Like you want to be read. Like the other
Yeah,
things
and like
are
for a
also,
long time.
yeah.
There's books that are the hot, like the buzzy books, but then they sort of disappear.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes I think I want the really buzzy book or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I want that treatment, or I want the number one on the best-selling list. But like so many of those books I just never hear about again. And I'm like, I'd much rather just build like a loyal, enthusiastic audience who like, people will message me on Instagram and be like, I tell everyone I meet to like read your book or whatever. Like that is like crazy and thrilling, beyond those sort of measurable things that feel, like we're told we should want or seem, is perpetuated. But
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, both of you. And so we're kind of circling this notion of a writing career. What are the different ways, both writing and otherwise, that help you kind of build what you think of what we, might define as a writing career and support your career in writing? And we'll, David, if you could answer first.
Yeah, for me, I mentioned there are a few stories that I knew I wanted to try to tell, and I've been doing that. And then other stories have come along, but in a way, I envisioned myself. More than anything, I wanted to sort. This is going to sound a little esoteric, a little flatly esoteric, maybe, but like I just wanted to lead the life I wanted to lead. And so I lived abroad in my 20s. I was playing football. We were talking about sports earlier. I was playing football that in part because I was still in my mind, you know, a player and didn't have opportunities to play here anymore. Um, but also then that allowed me to live abroad and travel. And it was then that I started writing. And I wanted to be able to write and tell these stories. As a graduate student, I began teaching and I realized that I loved college teaching. I remembered my college professors. So that became part of this life I wanted to lead, where I could teach and engage with, college-aged people about subject matter that is important. I teach, literature and some cultural studies stuff as well as writing. And then write and engage in that way. And sometimes it's, the op-ed piece in the newspaper because I have a strong opinion or a strong reaction to something, as well as these other stories, to ultimately write books, but then also to be able to, live abroad, you know, or spend at least significant time abroad in a way that I had in my 20s. And, so writing is an important piece of that, a really important piece of that, but it's just one of several pieces that sort of defines the life that I hoped to be able to lead. And knock on wood, um, that so far, I'm more or less leading. So,
That's fantastic. That's great. Mac, what about you? What are ways, both writing and otherwise, that you help support and build your writing career?
Um, yeah, I mean, having writing friends and writing community who like uniquely understand the struggle, who you can go to and be like, "Rah, rah, rah," and they know what you're talking about. But also then having a million non-writer friends who don't know what I'm ever talking about, but who help to contextualize a lot for me. That balance is really important, where I think something is the biggest despair of my whole life when it's like a writing hit. And um, my non-writing friends humble me. They're like, "What is that? What's a literary journal?" You know, you're like, "Wow, there's a big world out there." And then, not everyone is fixating on their writing acceptances. Parenting, I mean, parenting is like basically, 95% of my life. And that really, I see a lot of panels or a lot of think pieces on like how to be a writer and a parent at the same time. And it's usually like, how do you do it? How do you possibly have time? How do you da da da? But um, I don't really think of it like that. Like parenting nourishes my writing like so much. It's like my kids like enrich my life so much that like they fill me with like joy and wonder and curiosity, and like all of that just like keeps the writing flowing, like that relationship. um Shout out to my kids. But yeah, genuinely, like they inspire me all the time. Like, am I exhausted all the time? Yes. um but that attitude of like wonder and astonishment is really helpful in maintaining like the longevity, I think, of a writing career. Like just like I always think of it in sports. Like I retired from playing basketball when I was 22 because I had three ACL tears and like, whatever. But it's like the life of a writer can just, be so much longer. And like, how do you maintain the energy and the enthusiasm and the wonder and the curiosity and the passion and like all of those things that surround like a writing life and keep you writing, and persevering in the face of th failure, things not working, like as David has talked about. So anyway, yeah, that's my little spiel about parenting.
Oh, very well said. Very well said. And I know the parents out there are appreciating that. Um, so if you were to summarize, and Mac, we'll start with you. Um, Sophomore novel, what gets easier and what gets harder?
uh, I don't know about publishing, but writing, I just every time I write a book, I'm learning so much more about what like a book needs and like what it takes to craft a good book in fewer drafts. My debut, 10, 11, like really like full drafts. And I didn't necessarily have the sensibility yet to know what the book needed. Um, and A Sharp Endless Need, I was able to sort of figure out what the book needed quicker, in fewer drafts. And I also just learned patience. I was just in such a rush to get this first book, like not only finished, but then just like edited. And I was just like, I want to get to this next part of my life, whatever comes on the other side of this, I think. Um, and I just learned to like slow the fuck down. And that became easier. And then just every book I'm learning, oh, I know what this book needs and I can identify problems. Like I still get other readers and my friends to read, but so much of it is just my toolbox is getting like refined with everything. Um, and I'm just like bringing new tools and things like that. So like the craft side it feels really wonderful. You have the confidence. I wrote a book. I know how to write a book. Like I've done it. So there's evidence that I've done it. Um, so I should theoretically be able to do it again. But those moves, like the moves that it takes to pull off a book, they feel more natural maybe, or I trust my instinct more. What gets more difficult is I don't know. I'm finding with this one just I get on Goodreads too much.
Uh-oh.
Um,
Uh,
just comparing, I think, like reactions to maybe the books in different ways that I hadn't anticipated, but maybe like should have. Yeah, I'm having like a weird sort of understanding there, and where I'm just like, oh, people like this one more than this one, and what do they. And that's my own issue, but
yeah,
uh,
get out of there, Mac.
I know.
But thank you
Or
for,
like if someone's read both, but they like one way more than the other or something, like that's a new feeling to like navigate. Where I'm like, well, thanks for liking one of them, but oh man, Amanda's yelling
yeah,
at me. Everyone yells at me because I confess it to everyone.
yeah.
It's
But
pathological. I just
I
keep
think
confessing.
probably more authors than are willing to admit are in the same boat. So thank you for sharing that. Whether it's
So
a
many
cautionary
authors
tale or not.
So many authors tell me that they have the like discipline, and I'm like, no, just quit lying to everyone. I don't believe most of you. I believe some of you. There's some
Yeah,
people who
but
have it like blocked on all their browsers, like whatever, whatever. I'm still
mhm,
like, the workaround.
yeah. Yeah, the percentage is probably higher than what we're hearing.
Yeah.
David, what about you? What gets easier and what gets harder?
Again, echoing back to me, what's gotten easier is um, a realistic sort of expectation of the sort of world of publishing and all that, and correlatedly understanding how to navigate it myself, so that yeah, like I had sort of realistic expectations, which doesn't mean quashing any dreams, but sort of realistic expectations and all that. That's certainly gotten easier. And again, echoing Mac, like, and this is my fourth book, not my second, although it's my second novel, but it was really apparent in this second novel from Black Cloud Rising, my first adult novel. Um, I mentioned before that I'd started what would become the New International like almost 3 decades ago, and it was this big sprawling thing. But one of the things, like in writing Black Cloud Rising, not even, it wasn't even sort of deliberate. It's just sort of the way the story presented itself, and it's in this 3 week time frame or whatever. That's what helped me understand how to write the New Internationals. So it's that learning from the previous experience, even though I've written other books before and I've published and blah blah blah. Still, it felt like epiphany, like almost religious. Like I was like, yes, this 500-page sprawling thing that editors have rejected twice. Um, there's something to be learned in the craft of it, in sort of taking it, finding the core of it, the essence of it. And the New Internationals, the manuscript went from almost 500 pages to 320 manuscript pages, and therein is where the thing happened. Um, so yeah, that's sort of the way that we learn from the previous experiences. And just one final thing, and it's completely echoing Mac, but it was Toni Morrison who said it. So I want to say it like Mac, you are echoing Toni Morrison in a way that I think is wonderful. I remember when I was first starting to write when I lived abroad, it's way before the internet, and I'm reading, I was trying to figure out what it meant to be a writer. I'm like, 22, 23. So I was reading a lot of interviews with writers like from the Paris Review and whatnot. And I remember reading an interview with Toni Morrison. It was around the time of Beloved. And she was asked a similar question. And she said the difference between, sort of The Bluest Eye and Beloved, it's not huge, but the biggest difference is I get there faster, right?
Mm.
So still doing that thing that we're doing, driven in the way that we're driven, but we're learning from that experience of having done it before, you know?
Yeah, that's really heartening to hear.
Yeah.
Appreciate both of you saying that. And I think we've touched on everything that's in the Q&A, but folks, if you have any more questions, please submit them. But I'm just going to ask a few more questions that have come up to me while we've been talking. Both of you have mentioned literary journals, and Mac, you specifically talked about how literary journals kind of introduced you to this world of writing. What were those journals, if you can remember, that really helped you fall in love with writing?
Oh gosh. Um, I what is it called? I read like obviously the Paris Review and the New Yorker and whatnot, but the Adroit Journal, I ended up being a prose reader for them for a while because I like loved what they were publishing so much. Um, they're like a higher tier journal or whatever you want to call them, but they're always publishing like super weird stuff and um
I read
so,
poetry for a joy.
oh, you do?
Yeah.
Huh.
That's awesome. I was a prose reader a few years ago. Yeah. I mean, so they were like one where I was like, oh, they're taking sort of cool risks or they appreciate like strange stuff that maybe some other journals aren't.
Yeah, everyone should check out Adroit. They're really, really great and should be submitting there. David, what about you? What are the journals you would recommend to early writers?
I, you know, I was publishing in journals when it was so much more physical. So as it shifted online, I feel a little bit out of touch, but I always respected the sort of, I mean, it's very traditional, but the Kenyan and the Southern reviews were always just I didn't always love the prose or the poems or the nonfiction, but there's a way in which what would come out in there was clearly a reflection of sort of the editorial staff, and there was something there that I just on a purely writerly basis that I always very much liked and admired, and I tend towards I'm a fairly politically minded person, for better or worse, and I tend towards places that aren't afraid to say something. So I've always loved Witness, for instance, as a literary journal, although I'm not even sure they still exist. Um, Plowshares has a sort of distinctive kind of
Mm.
voice, but also a sort of vision, you know. But again, I don't read near. I love literary journals. So I don't read them nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah, no, but thank you for sharing those. Those are great recommendations. And what's next for each of you? I know some people are superstitious about this sort of thing, but if you could give us some insight into what you're working on, if anything. David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, no, I'm in the middle of it. I mentioned a story that sort of decided as I was thinking about becoming a writer, and it's basically my parents' story. I have a little bit of a complicated backstory, and that's the thing that became the New Internationals. But in doing that research, a lot of my work is very research based. I didn't know that it would be when I started out, but it is. And in doing a lot of that research, interviews with families, but also a lot of letters and things like that, the story it just is bigger than like the New International started to feel like too small a vehicle in a way for their stories. Their stories were bigger than that. But the New Internationals as a novel needed to go from 500 pages to 320. So I'm working on nonfiction. I'm working on the story, my parents' story, but in as nonfiction. Um, Not exactly memoir, more like what the New Yorker calls personal history. There's an element of me as storyteller, but it's really focused on them.
Oh, I'm so excited to read it eventually.
Yeah, knock on wood. Hope so. That'll be good, but thank you.
Yeah. And Mac, what about you? What are you working on? Have you returned to memoir at all?
No. So A Sharp Endless Need I sold in a two-book deal. So I have a story collection coming out next summer, July.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I don't know the exact date yet, but next July.
Okay,
It's
so
called.
are you doing edits?
Uh, yeah, we just finished like I'm moving into copy editing like in a few weeks. Yeah, it's called Pervert.
Amazing. Pervert? Sorry, I
Pervert.
keep speaking over you when you say the title. Amazing.
Pervert. Perverts. Yeah.
Sorry to make you say that 5 times.
I'm gonna have to say it like 800 million times when it comes out. So
This is true. This is true. Well, we can't wait for that. And thank you both so much for spending this evening with us. I learned so much from each of you. I'm so appreciative for you all for sharing, for being so open, and sharing your experiences with us. Um, I want to thank everyone for joining us here on Zoom. Those of you on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you watching in the future, thanks for watching. Definitely check out these authors. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic books. You will love them, I promise. And yeah, have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you all.
thank
It was
you.
great to talk to you all.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
friends.
Bye-bye.
See you in Vermont, Mac.